Good afternoon, preppers. Welcome to Goshen Prepping. It's a very simple premise. Wars are won and lost by supplies. Munitions and gas will easily make the modern day victors. And we saw this happen. We've seen this happen in numerous wars. I mean, specifically World War II, Hitler was running his tanks empty for his war machine. So he broke a truce and invaded Russia through Operation Barbarossa, if you know your history, and numerous reasons for this. But one of them was try to obtain access to the Russian oil fields. And of course, he lost heavily. So he turned to Romania to be able to keep the gas flowing as a last-ditch effort. So, of course, we just bombed the living crap out of Romania, so that way he couldn't have his oil. And, of course, the rest is history. I mean, obviously oversimplified, but that's one of the leading things that led to his demise. So, present day, we've talked about numerous times how Biden continuously takes oil from our strategic reserve and even sends it to China, sends it to Ukraine, and claims it's to help our gas pump, our prices at the pump, but it doesn't, and that's not what it's about. And because of this, we're having some serious problems with amount of our strategic reserve and supply. You can see on this chart, it's actually been pretty steady for a long time, and then boom, down it goes to almost half of what it was before. And you can easily see that if the United States does get put into a situation in which we have a major war, which honestly I think we're heading that way, that could easily cause us some serious complications. And Biden refuses to try to get oil in, for example, from the Keystone Pipeline, or even actually drill new oil here in the United States to resupply not only this, but our pump as well. And honestly, I know having high gas prices, which are going up at the pump, is awful, but that's not near as important as an impending war. Because if we don't have that fuel, we're toast. We may be toast anyway, as we'll see in this video. But Russia, in that situation, of course, has lots and lots of fuel oil and may not actually have the tech the United States has, because Russia has lots of tanks. I mean, a ridiculous amount, but most of them are like Soviet-era tanks. And they've lost upwards of like 2,000 or 3,000 already in Ukraine, and simply just can't keep up with the tech that we're supplying Ukraine, for example, like the Javelin, to take those tanks out. Now, what they have been doing, and they've been trying to do, how about that, is to produce a new tank called the T-14 Armata. And this T-14 is impressive. I'm going to go ahead and say that. Basically, it's supposed to be like a modern counterpart to the Abrams and Leopard 2, which Ukraine's getting, but they have had serious problems with it, including for the fact that it has a diesel engine. Like the United States Abrams tank runs on a jet engine, but the diesel engine inside there simply is not doing what it's supposed to be able to make the tank go. And they've had delay after delay after delay. They're looking at only possibly 40 of them being delivered this year to be able to actually fight against Ukraine. And it's never been battle tested either. So who knows how well it's going to work or won't work. Does that mean NATO will do better? Does that mean NATO will fare better if World War III starts? It's not simply just oil, but because of serious budget cuts since the Berlin Wall, because our main enemy was no longer there per se, the United States armament, the budget and the armament, has dropped drastically. And a lot of these munitions and everything we've been sending to Ukraine. So our munitions, because of this, are seriously limited. U.S. military has fewer munitions than you might think, and that's a problem. Most Americans already know that the U.S. military is the most powerful in the world, and has been for decades. But that gives false ideas of what our military is able to do. For example, one might assume the military has massive amounts of shells, bombs, and munitions, and would last through the duration of any war. But the war in Ukraine has shown this is simply not the case. Listen to this. The U.S. began sending military aid to Ukraine last February, a year ago. By April, 2 months later, our stocks of Javelin anti-tank missiles and Stinger anti-aircraft missiles were depleted by a third. That fast. What would happen if we actually faced a competitor like China or Russia directly? The biggest problem is a lot of the budgets we do have, instead of going for munitions, go for things like tanks, jets, and ships. And the stockpiles will only last for a few months of war. And wars rarely last just a few months. I mean, ask Putin. He really thought he was going to roll right through Ukraine, and here we are a year later. And here's the big problem. The defense industry will not be able to replenish some of its stocks for years. Years. For example, the Stinger, an amazing missile, an anti-aircraft missile. CEO of Raytheon says the company could not ramp up production for at least 18 months because they have to redesign some of the electronics in the seeker head. 18 months. Not to mention serious supply chain problems also affect this as well, and can cause delays for the entire program, especially microchips. That's a serious problem right now. Here is a very sobering statement. The math is simple. If the military has enough munitions for only a few months and the defense industry requires 18 months of supply, we will not be able to actually fight a protracted war. And as war is looming, NATO against Russia, the United States against China, having these munitions is obviously vitally important because our tech in the United States is incredible. Our military tech is the best on the planet. But if you don't have that tech, if you don't have the missiles to make it happen, then what can we do? Not to mention the oil as well. Look, you have to understand, we have some serious rough times ahead. Even if we don't go to war, we do, but I believe we will. And the war in Russia and Ukraine is accelerating. Generals see an invasion of Taiwan in just a matter of a couple of years, and our oil supplies are dwindling, our stockpiles for munitions are dwindling, and they're not being reproduced, not fast enough anyway. And listen, if you think we have inflation now, if you think we have shortages now, we haven't seen anything yet. Make sure, preppers, listen to me, get your house in order, get your preps in order, because you need to be prepared for this. Thanks for watching.